It is usual times of great social unrest, economic unrest, of war that causes people, I think most often, when they have challenges in their lives, that causes them to turn to their faith. And the Civil War generation is no different in this regard. When you think about the loss of life, and this is, remember, this is the age of developing photography, right? So you can now see what is happening on battlefields. Not just, I just showed you a bunch of drawings. That's great. When Matthew Brady, who is really the father of photography, when he sets up in his New York studio a window filled with images from the battlefield, people are absolutely shocked by it. They've never seen anything like it. You can hear about battle. You can read about it in the newspaper. You can see lithographs and woodblock prints. That's very different than seeing people actually dead on the battlefield. And just think about this again contemporarily. Our government has learned this extremely well. All right? You do not see, you know, they learned it from the Vietnam War. You don't show battle and the dead or the wounded while people are eating dinner, right? You know, so they can watch the war from their television. It's not done. The United States today still keeps very, very tight rein on the types of images that are shown on television because they don't want to sway the public. So you see these images that occur, and these are widely known images of the dead on the battlefield, the real toll of warfare. Every time there's a major battle, people are going to their local newspapers to check over the casualty, the names. Everybody is listed. The names of the dead, the names of the wounded, and who are they looking for? They're looking for people from their town, they're looking for people from their family. This is when embalming comes in to being. How to get the soldiers home. This is former slaves digging people up after the Battle of Cold Harbor, on the Cold Harbor battlefield. And then, of course, what do you do with all of these men? What happens to them? What happens in the immediate aftermath of battle? The United States, because they think this war is going to be so short, they're not equipped. The government is literally not equipped to deal with the excessive nature of the war, the number of people who are killed and wounded. More people die in the American Civil War from disease than they do from actual battlefield injury, from various diseases or from infection, from wounds. And the United States government is just either medically or in terms of materiel, they're not prepared for what this war is really going to be. Bridgeport forms the very first Soldiers' Aid Society in the entire country. Other towns throughout the North follow our model and create Soldiers' Aid Societies. Women are they're making uniforms. They are sewing socks. We find advertisements in the Hartford Courant and in the New Haven Register from this time period, literally giving specifications for knitting military socks. Asking for blankets. In the immediate aftermath of battles, you will see advertisements asking people to scrape their clothing so that they can get lint. And we know what lint is for. It's to pack wounds, right? To stop the flow of blood. And so those on the home front are literally sending a river of supplies to men in the field. And they're sending them to men throughout the Army, but also specifically to various Connecticut regiments. And they organize their own steamers and train cars, and this becomes a major operation. This is before, of course, the Red Cross is in existence. The Red Cross grows out of the American Civil War through the U.S. Sanitary Commission, and really women are very much the leaders of this, and faith communities are involved in this as well. Well, one of the things that happens is they have to deal with all the hundreds and thousands of dead and wounded. So you get the beginnings of national cemeteries at this time period. We have letters from Connecticut soldiers who are stationed around Washington City at this time, and they actually describe the formation of Arlington Cemetery and state, one of them, Fred Lucas from the 2nd Connecticut Heavy Artillery, says very, very clearly, he says, I visited this new federal cemetery, and they're putting it up in very fine style. I imagine that in the future it is a place that many people will come to pay their respects. And I read this letter actually having been at Arlington 2 weeks earlier, and then found this letter, and it struck me that he was talking about it as, it is a place that people continue to go to pay their respects. And you get the sense of what the scale of this is. So, faith in the Civil War. You read the letters of soldiers, and they're constantly talking about prayer services, about bringing men together, about trying to hold services, trying to make sense of the war, supporting each other through their faith. All kinds of examples of mass that was held among the soldiers. Here's the image that we started with, and this image is in the exhibit. So if anything, the war intensifies people's religious faith rather than really challenges it. So, but the war also causes Christians to think more about what the meaning of the war is as it relates to slavery. And so what you have is the Christian war for the Union emphasized that the nation had to be preserved because of the special place America occupied in world history, with its Republican institutions, democratic ideals, and Christian values. This is what I told you about to begin with, is that most in the North go forward to fight this war for the idea of Republican institutions, small r, the concept of representative government. But it ultimately comes to mean something more than this. And again, Lincoln is a perfect example of this, because Lincoln had not been considered to be terribly religious. But as the war goes on, his faith grows deeper as the war goes on. It's also true of our wartime governor, William Buckingham. His faith, he had already been very, very faithful and very devoted to his faith, but it becomes even more so as the war goes on. And it becomes this. Christian ministers often portrayed the war in millennial terms, drawing on the imagery of the 20th chapter of Revelation and on other portions of the Bible describing events near the close of history, suggesting that a northern victory might prepare the way for the kingdom of God on earth. That this is much bigger than just about a conflict between the North and the South. This is about something millennial in the eyes of God. And so the Union must be preserved not only because it was essential to our own welfare, because through its preservation, the divine doctrine of popular government would live among men. If America is lost, the world is lost. Lincoln said this repeatedly when he talked about the concept of the United States as the last best hope of earth. That if we can't, and Lincoln says this in his inaugural address as well, he says, we have proven that we can create a Republican institution. We've proven that we can sustain it. Now we must see if it can stand the test of war, if we can continue it. And so if we are unable to do that, what will it say to the rest of the world about this great experiment in self-government? This is foremost on the minds of many, many Northerners. And so one non-denominational religious paper said, if it falters, all is lost. We shall stand in history as the most beneficent or maleficent of human generations, and as the most faithful or the most false in the eye of God.